Welcome to the Calm-Edged Rebels podcast. I'm Jenny Field.
I'm Advita Patel.
And I'm Trudy Lewis. So today we're going to talk about moments. It's something that's come to my mind recently and more increasingly as I coach, as I talk about being present. And one of the things that made it stand out for me recently was I went to a bookshop on Saturday. So Saturday mornings, I always go out for a long walk and I'll stop and do some shopping. And then I might stop at a bookshop or do something. So this particular day, I was walking through the bookshop and I started to get so nervous or panicky about the fact that I've got to move on to do the next thing. You know, I kept rushing myself in the whole time that I was there. And it was like just a sudden thought that came to me that said, stop. And why don't you just enjoy being at a bookshop because you love books and you love being in and amongst books and exploring things and all of the things that come with that. And so I kind of suddenly pulled myself back and breathed a little bit and just said, I'm in the bookshop. It's a Saturday morning. The only thing I have to rush home for is Saturday kitchen. I really do not need to worry about what's happening in this moment, apart from the fact that I'm enjoying being in and amongst books. Mm-hmm. And so it made me think about an episode and, you know, something that we should talk about perhaps, because I'm sure you've all had moments that stand out. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I found was around The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, who one of the things they talk about is that certain experiences have an extraordinary impact. Certain moments can propel us into action, can take us to the next level, can take us to the next step, and how important that is. But then also in contrast, a little bit like my bookshop story, they can just be precious, especially when it comes to relationships and when we're talking about the people that we have in our lives, in our world. And I just think, you know, in the world that we live in, which is so full of busyness, so full of complexities, sometimes all we need is a little bit of calm, a little bit of becoming present, and a little focus on the moment that we're in, and seeing how we can use that to take us somewhere, seeing how we can use that to celebrate, to nurture ourselves, you know, and all of the things that really build us up as a person. Because I think one of the things that we really highlight when we do our retreat is that whole person view. So we're not just saying to people, oh, you need to be a good business manager to then move to the next level, or it's all about promotion, it's all about starting your own business. A lot of what we talk about is about the whole person. And I really believe that this is an area that perhaps we need to focus on or pay attention to, at least, and build it in as a practice in your own life. To make you better. So I'm just going to bring you two in. So yeah, let me know what you think. Is it important to you? Is it something that you notice? Is it something that you bypass because, of course, you know, we've all got so many things on our mind. And have you had a defining moment in your life?
Yeah.
Oh,
several.
There you go. So many questions.
Several. You're very defined.
I'm very defined. I think I've had lots of defining moments in my life that have changed my life. And epiphanies and just things that have really taken me down a different path because of these specific moments that have happened. And I think going back to your earlier point, Trudy, about us not appreciating the moment we're in, things like going out and browsing the bookstore and walking in the park and looking around and just think, because you're always kind of, let's just get this over and done with.
Yeah.
Let's just go out for my walk and get my 10,000 steps. Just march in a bit of a miserable way. And without actually slowing down the moment in itself. And I don't think we ever really appreciate that as much as we should be in terms of our own personal well-being. And I think we're always like, that toxic productivity thing again. It's like, right, let me just do this, and I need to go and do this, I need to go and do this. And you have a list going on in your head continuously. And there've been so many regrets in a loose sense of way where I wish I spent a little bit more time appreciating that specific moment, whether it's like, if you're like if you're in a bit of a grumpy mood, for example, and you're going out for like a family or friends dinner and you kind of want to be there and you're not kind of want to be there and you've got lots of stuff going on, I wish I just kind of parked it. I'm much better at it now than I used to be. Nowadays, I do really have a strong conversation with myself and say, we're not here forever. Yeah. And it's really important to appreciate the people that you're with and the work that, and the work that you do and enjoying that work as well. So I get the kind of personal moment stuff. And now when I am out, I don't have my phone. If I'm out for dinner with my friends, my phone will be in my handbag, and I'll never really check it, to be honest, unless they've gone to the bathroom or something. I'll have a quick scan, like you do. But generally, I don't even take my phone out to take pictures of food. Like, remember that used to be a trend?
I think it's still a trend.
It's still a trend.
I think it is in certain places.
Well, I don't. Because I think it's a distraction, because then you get your phone out, like, oh, who's messaged me? What's on Instagram? What's going on Twitter? You kind of lose that sense, don't you? And again, it's that active listening to people. And people really appreciate that. And you really learn a lot when you are in that moment. So the personal stuff is really important. In terms of professional moments that have changed my path, like I said, several of these moments, from the extent of me wanting to set my own business up based on a conversation I had in my old workplace. And I thought, I don't want to feel this like this anymore. Like, I don't want to be dictated to in what they believe I should go on to next. I wanted to take control of that. So that was a defining moment for me. There was also a defining moment, which I've spoken about before, by a leader who called me unprofessional.
Oh, if you could see her face.
It still stings.
I feel the pain.
And do you know what? You know how long ago that was? 9 years ago.
Wow.
And I feel like it was only yesterday. I remember that conversation so vividly. And I was like, if you know me personally and you know me, if you've worked with me, I pride myself on professionalism. So as soon as, and that is such a word, that's such a hurtful word for me when someone's, I think the hurtful word for many people, but for me, when they said, oh, I think you were a bit unprofessional in that meeting. And all because I left, it's just ridiculous, I left a printout on the printer and I didn't take it into the room.
Was it a printout of like a photocopy of something that you shouldn't have been photocopying?
No, it was a printout.
Because that is unprofessional.
I know. No, it was a printout of engagement scores.
Oh.
It was ridiculous. And the worst thing is, oh my God, it's a therapy session for me now. I'm not I won't go on about it. But that moment, you can see I'm still not over it. But that is still a defining moment for me. And not necessarily in a positive way either. Yeah. So every time I feel that I haven't been the best I could be, it takes me back to that moment where I was told, you're a bit unprofessional. And so it's that moments as well can really, really impact you in your behaviours.
Yeah.
And you really have to spend energy in understanding how it's defining you. And that moment did define me because I was paranoid and it knocked my confidence, which is why I'm so passionate about confidence, because I saw the difference in me from that moment to how I reacted to other things. And it was a good 6 to 8 months of coaching and mentoring from other people in my life that allowed me to realise, actually, I'm not unprofessional. I'm actually very good at my job and I work hard at what I do. Yeah. And I'm proud of who I am. But it took me a while to get to that point. And like even there when I was talking about it took me back 9 years ago when that happened. But there are, so I think it's important to think about why those moments have that impact on you as well as appreciating the good moments. But there are certain moments that make you feel the way you feel and really unpicking that. I obviously still have some unpicking to do.
Indeed. I can tell.
You could go and work on that.
I can tell.
I'll go and work on it now while you two talk.
Yeah. No, but it's so interesting to hear it from that perspective as well, because that's the power of moments, is that they hit your emotions. And when they hit your emotions and they hit things deep in you, because it could have been that it triggered something that was even further back from maybe a teacher or something like that.
And I was a SWAT at school. I never got in trouble. I was like perfect.
Did you ever have detention?
No.
You've never had detention?
No.
Have you had detention, Trude?
I have, and I was head girl, so it looked like so yeah. But I mean, I was. Yeah, I was sort of good. I like the social side of school more than the actual academic side. It was only afterwards I was doing more academic
Yeah,
stuff.
that's fair.
Yeah.
So
I think the whole moments thing is so interesting. I love the film Sliding Doors,
Oh, I love that
which I
film.
often talk about in terms of, what would happen. I think it's the sliding doors of the tube in London, isn't it? And if he made it or didn't make it.
Yeah.
And there's several sliding doors moments for me in my life where I think about past relationships that weren't good, healthy, or anything relationships to be in. And if I'd stayed and if I hadn't had the courage to leave, what would my life be like now? So I have sort of moments like that for me. Very much like you on the being present. So I don't have my phone out at dinner. I like to be very present in whatever I'm doing. Interestingly, I'm reflecting on when we surprised you in Manchester for your birthday and how I don't feel like I was as present as I maybe wanted to be then. I do feel like I was a bit distracted.
Really?
Yeah, at certain points in the dinner, I remember feeling a little bit distracted and being annoyed at myself that I don't feel like I was as present there as I wanted to be, having made the trip to Manchester to see you.
And I think that happens when there was a lot going on at that time.
Yeah, I think there was a lot going on, and I think that's important sometimes. Is we try and squeeze lots of things in but also for me, I'm very much there's nothing more important, and I've said that several times since I've had my own business, where I've had friends going through chemotherapy, things like coming up for your birthday, like they are all things I can do because those are things that are important to me, and that comes down to my values and my relationships. But I very much believe that if I need to go and see someone in hospital or surprise someone for their birthday or whatever it is, I will make that work because that's fundamentally important. And therefore I will make space for those moments that really mean something. But I think being present is increasingly hard when there's just so much noise in the world. And I think people do find that very difficult. And you have to be quite disciplined to do that. And I think your story about the bookshop, Trude, really resonates with me in terms of packing things into a day. My husband was very good very early on in our relationship, being like, we're only doing one thing a day at the weekend. And I was like, what? I'm used to like 6. But he's very much like, let's just do one thing. And I love that about him because he slows me down, which is why we work so well together. Because then I'm not rushing from one thing to the next. And I've got friends who are constantly triple booked, who are trying to cram everything in. And I just think, that's not what I want. That's not the sort of life I want to lead. And I think you can control the pace of that a bit more. So if I'm traveling for work, I'll always add on days that allow me to either get round to the right time zone or see some of the sights. So I'm not just rushing in and rushing out of a city. We went to Chicago, Trudy, when we went for work, and we had a day almost either side of the client work to enjoy seeing Chicago. Yeah. Mainly the firehouse from Chicago Fire, because I'm a big fan.
And I'm getting excited.
And you really enjoyed being with the firemen. But it's having time to do things like that. Have moments that bring joy in amongst, work or whatever else it is. And a bit like you, I think there's probably a couple of defining moments for me. I definitely have that sliding doors one about my previous relationship and what my life would be like now and how different it would be. And the biggest defining moment for me that I revisit every year is when I decided to set up the business, and I decided to do that at a yoga retreat in Spain where I had some coaching and came to the conclusion that it was the right thing to do. And I go back there every year, same time of year, sort of January, February, to almost relive that moment and reflect on how far I've come and just embrace the stillness and the calm that I find there to help me sort of stop and ground myself a bit to then sort of move forwards. So I've got a few.
Yeah, and that's so interesting in that, that whole thing of reflecting, because we talk about creating space, and when we coach, that's exactly one of the things you do. You kind of, you help somebody to create some space to think about some things. But by reflecting, by going back to some of these moments that were important, powerful, impactful, even the good and the bad ones, sometimes just creates that space that we need in our head to think about our lives and to think about, well, hold on a minute. Do I need to be defined by this moment? Or is this moment teaching me a lesson that I can then take forward so that something doesn't happen again? Or maybe I approach this particular project a little bit differently. it's all about how we bring it together and say, okay, so we may have had this moment when we were a child, but how does that enthuse you for later? So when I was high school, I was told, I didn't go to high school in the UK, and one of the things I was told is that because I went to a technical high school, which was a little bit different, you learned technical things and academic work, you would never be able to go to university and do journalism or mass communications and so on. And I remember taking that seriously because at the end of the day, I had originally said that's what I wanted to do. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So through high school, I kind of thought, oh, well, can't do that. It impacted how I approached certain subjects. And then when I left high school and came back to the UK and then found, actually, after working in a totally different industry, I've made a full circle back to the industry that I really wanted to be in the beginning. Without those kind of voices in my head telling me that that's not something that I can achieve, and realizing that, you know, after that, doing a master's, you know, and studying the very thing that I was told that I couldn't do. For me, it was a moment that said, you can't do it. But then also that moment made me think, but I can do it if I really want to. And, you know, at the time I hadn't thought of it in that way, but reflecting backwards, I kind of thought, oh, actually that moment drove me to want to succeed.
I think there's definitely something about almost like the negative moments that we've all talked about some negative stuff. And people always say to me, what's been the moment that helped you in your career, or what are the moments? And I know they're looking for a really positive, upbeat story. And I'm always like, it's always the negative. It's the person that said to me, you know, you will never progress your career here because of how you were when you first arrived. You know, don't try and run before you can walk. I'm sure ordinarily you're a good person, but on this occasion, we've talked about that one before. I won't go into that therapy session. You know, it's those things that have made me say, I will progress here, and I did. And I won't run before I can walk, I'll fly. And I am a good person and you are very insignificant. So let's move on from you. And it's amazing how at the time, they were quite damaging moments for me. I mean, you were with me when we had the You're a Good Person stuff, and I was not enjoying myself at all.
I was there too.
Yes, you were both there. That was a collective, you were there. And now you sort of turn it around. It's that resilience, isn't it, of turning that moment into a positive, reframing it to learn from it and all those sorts of things.
And that's so important in taking that negative experience and using it to build your strength and take the power back. And I think I always talk about power a lot, power and privilege, power specifically, because often when you have those negative moments, it's come from power. And it's come from people in more privileged positions than you. Mm-hmm. And they often do that because they feel insecure in who they are. And that is something, and I know that's a broad brush, you know, and I know it is, but it's generally true. You know, if you think back to some of the moments, the negative moments where people have said something to what they said to you, it's often someone who is more senior, who probably has more power and privilege. And they do it to make you feel less than what you're worth. And I don't know what it is, you know, there'll be some kind of psychology around it, but it's really important that you don't allow them to adjust your path and distract you. Like you just said, you know, I'm not going to, you know, walk before I run. I'm actually going to fly.
Yeah.
And you don't get to tell me because it's about me, not you. Yeah. And there's definitely elements in understanding feedback and taking feedback on board. And, you know, our friend Brené,
oh, yes.
We haven't mentioned her in this episode so far.
Restraining order coming from Brené, season 7.
But our friend Brené, and we mentioned this a few times, it's like, if you're not in the arena getting your, you know, butt kicked at the same time, then am I really interested in what you have to say to me?
Yeah.
Probably not, no. And that is so important. And that was a very positive defining moment for me when I read Brené's book around the power of vulnerability and watched her podcast, because I spent so much time and energy believing what these people are telling me because I felt they were more important than me, which is just, when I reflect back, it's ridiculous when you really think about it. That person who told me that was unprofessional, I mean, who are they?
But it's amazing how liberal people are with their opinions of you.
I know.
You know, when you think about someone saying to you, like, it's not very professional, and the things people have said to me, you know, there's too many to mention.
Well, it's the flippance, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's not, and we talk about being kind, right?
Yeah.
It's that flippance of how we just throw things out of our mouth without thinking about the consequence or who we're talking to and how it's going to impact them.
Yeah, because the impact, I think, is, as we're discussing now, you know, people will have made that throwaway comment to you about the professional because you left something
And
on
they
the
probably don't
photocopier.
even remember it.
They probably don't remember.
They won't care.
Wouldn't have even thought twice about it.
No.
But that has stayed with you for 9 years. It's been 84 years, 9 years. And it will stay with you, you know, forever. And the people that said to me, you know, ordinarily you're a good person, that will stay with me forever.
Yeah, and teachers.
And
for
all
me,
of them.
you know, that's when I say that, it actually has stayed with me.
Yeah.
I remember the feeling, the deflation that I felt of, I was putting my hopes on this, and then it threw me because I then didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, because then I was like, so what else is there for me?
And that's such an age to have that, that knock, isn't it? Because it's such a time in your life where you're really starting, it's that adolescence, you're starting to know who you are, and that's just,
And it impacts the way you, your self-esteem as well throughout your adulthood. So when I talk about confidence with people, I always go back to that time because there'll be a teacher, a parent, a guardian, carer, whoever, friend, who would have said something to you that you probably at the time took it quite seriously, but then thought it's just a passing remark. But then when you reflect back, you're like, oh my goodness, that was a defining moment for me. For that was when my English teacher, and I was really good at English, but he said to me, oh, your writing's really good, but you know, it's a really difficult profession to get into. So it's a bit like a hobby. And
I've written a book now.
That is, I know, and I wish I could go back and tell him. But
you should send him a copy.
No, I can't remember his name though. That's how insignificant that was, that moment. But I remember that specific when I handed in this story, and I used to write a lot of stories when I was younger. It's like an escapism. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this story. I think I've spoken about the dolphin story before.
I think you have, because I've just had a moment of sharing my enigmatic gem story, and I'm sure I've talked about that before.
I think we have spoken about the dolphin story. Anyway, I won't talk about it now. But I remember them saying that, this is great, and it's, you know, you have a very creative mind and you've got a really good sense of words, but it's a hobby, right? And it's really difficult to get into the world of authors and all that kind of stuff. So, and coming from a South Asian background, if I told my parents I wanted to be an author, they'd be like,
are you joking?
Calm down.
Yeah.
Go and do your IT degree and calm down. It was a bit like that. And that kind of did put me off writing a book. So I never really had a desire to write a book. And then Jenny wrote her book, and I thought, that's amazing that she's written a book. And then I read Ruchika Tulsian's book around inclusion and purpose. And it really inspired me to speak to Priya about some of the work we're doing, and thought, well, yes.
Why not?
Why can't we do it? Why not? Like, why? Why can't we do it?
Yeah. But that's the whole kind of if not now, when kind of thing. And we're all quite like that.
Yeah.
And that's very almost moment related. It's that
Absolutely.
if not now, when.
Yeah.
If I'm not going to, and that's how I felt with starting the business. If I don't do it now, when is going to be a good time?
Yeah.
What needs to be happening for it to be a good time? And I think when you're thinking about those moments that change your life, or being present, or whatever it is, if not now, when, for me, is a big phrase that I come back to again and again.
Well, you hear people say, I'm waiting for the perfect moment.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
But there is no perfect
moment.
And it's interesting because in Chip and Dan Heath's book, they talk about breaking the script.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. You have to break the script. It's a bit like we can't allow ourselves to be defined by what others say or think of us. And who said you can't write a book?
Yeah.
But the behaviours that come from those moments, I think is long lasting. So to overcome some of those, I think it takes a lot of work. And my brain is starting to think, and I've sort of shared a bit in this episode about this past relationship that wasn't very nice. And I remember there were some phrases that this person would say to me, like, you know, you're like mold, you've really grown on me. You know, and and horrible things, you know, to do with my weight and all sorts of stuff, which has been a battle for a very long time in terms of being comfortable in myself, and that kind of mold comment then leaves you feeling like you're a bit of a bother to other people, so you don't want to be a bother, and my behaviours and my self-esteem and everything has had to take a lot of work to come back from that moment. Because I think that's what people don't realise, is how much of that knock-on effect around your behaviours that then are changed as a result of someone else's actions and that moment in time.
Yeah.
And how quickly things can shift and alter, and how much work it takes to come back.
Yeah. And I think we've all done a level of work. So it's,
Yeah.
you know, if anybody is listening and and has gone through stuff like that, you know, reach out for some counselling, help, conversation, coaching even.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that you have to stay there, because in and amongst the fact that we can very easily relate those stories, we can share those stories, they haven't actually defined us. So they defined us for a moment, but we've moved on. And I think for anybody listening out there, that's exactly what can happen with their situations. In contrast, I remember my mother would say to me, I can do whatever I want to do. She instilled in me, within the moments that I had, because I lost her quite at a young age, there were moments where she consistently said, you can be who you want to be. You can become who you want to be. You can talk to everybody. You can talk to anybody. So I never, ever had a fear of talking to people, whether they were senior or not senior or important or deemed as not important, you know, whatever it was, I could speak to everybody. And so in contrast, I kind of try and focus on the moments that were incredibly positive in contrast of the negative ones, because the negative ones were powerful. But I think, again, it's about thinking, I'm not going to stay there, and I'm actually not going to let it define me.
You're making me think as well about how, for me personally, I've shared this a few times about the negative moments of what's driven so much of my behaviour, my future, my decisions, that if I'm thinking about positive moments that have been, you know, this was a really positive moment, and you know, there's less of those for me. And I don't know whether that's just because I just am a bit blasé about the positive.
But is it that you haven't noticed them?
Or that I don't take the time to be present in the positive moments because I just kind of, you know...
Well, you become complacent.
Swim through. Yeah, a little bit. And there's a reflection for me, some homework to go away and look at.
Yeah, but our minds also focus on the negative more easily and quickly than the positive. So chances are we have had equal amounts, or if not more, positive moments.
Yes.
But they haven't stood out as much, or we haven't noticed them as much. We didn't pay as much attention to them because they were just nice.
Yeah.
But the negative ones really hit that part of your brain that latches onto negativism.
Yeah.
But I think the negative ones change you. I genuinely think that the negative ones really do change the way you feel about yourself, positively and negatively, which is why we pay more attention to them. And we always say, so I know we're going to be moving to tips now, but one of my big tips to anybody who is struggling right now to appreciate the moments that they're in is to record the positive moments and keep a track of them.
Yeah.
You know, write it down.
Yeah,
so I do it all the time. I take a picture, I take a video, or if I write down in my notes and I save it into a folder on my phone where I appreciate that. I don't do it as much as I should be doing it. And we spoke about appreciating those moments of those successes that you have and the wins that you get and the support that you receive more. So I'm trying to be more intentional with that. And I've got something like 3,000 things in my folder.
Wow.
And I know.
Wow, that's a lot.
Aren't you great?
But it's not only feedback, but it's also things that have inspired me.
Yeah.
Got a quote that I've read, or a picture of my family, and our good times together, you know, stuff like that. So I think it's really important to find that kind of anchor for you, so you can remind yourself of those moments when you feel a bit not yourself, or things are happening. The other tip I would share with everyone is be present. You know, it's kind of been the theme of this conversation is nothing's going to happen in the 60 minutes you don't have your phone on your hand. And this is more for me than anybody else, to be honest.
Advita, nothing's going to happen if you don't have the phone in your hand.
I have to. So if I go, I have a rule now. If I go out for dinner with friends and family, my phone stays in my bag. Like, I will not take it out. The only time I will take it out, like I said, is if they go to the bathroom and I'll have a quick scan. But other than that, even then I probably won't. I just sit there in the moment. So those are my kind of two top tips, is just be present, appreciate it, and record the good times.
Yeah. And before I go on to Jenny and her tips, all of what you just said made me think that it presents to us a question that we need to ask ourselves. What are we going to do with that moment? What are we going to do with the negative and the positive moments of our lives? Are we just going to let it overcome us, or are we going to do something about it? Or are we going to take it to give us more strength and help us to be better? Jenny, what tips?
So I think there's a couple for me, because we've really danced around sort of two sides of moments in this episode, which I really like, the sort of being present and then the life-defining moments together. So being present for me is, the phone away, that sort of stuff. But I don't have any notifications on my phone at all. So unless somebody calls me or proper texts me, I wouldn't get notified. And that's intentional, because I feel like, if the world's on fire, you'd call and then I can deal with that. And that really helps me stay present, because I know that nothing needs my attention. And so that's quite important. I think there are other things about being present for me that are doing the things that I need to do to enable me to do that. And my example of this is possibly things like having my laptop with me when I go on holiday, which for a lot of people would be, I can't believe you're doing that when, you're on holiday and you should be having a break and all that sort of stuff.
Judgy out there.
I know.
Everyone's got an opinion on everyone else's life. Bore off, it's mine. But for me, having the laptop allows me to be more present, because if something was to happen, I can deal with it, I can action it. I'm not worried that I wouldn't be able to do something if I had to. And when you run your own business, that is, a big part of that. When I went away recently, I just had my iPad with me, which again, I can do everything on there, but I didn't want to have to carry the laptop. It was hand luggage and all that sort of stuff. But having things around me that help me not worry about other things is important. That really does help. And I think one other thing that I would probably say as a kind of tip is you have to work on yourself. Don't give someone else the power to dictate your life. And I can say that through my own experience. And it's easy to let someone define your character by their belief and their perception of you and what they've said. And that's not the case. That's their experience and that's fine. But you can control that and you can live the life that's the life you want to lead without someone else's branding or perception in that. So I would encourage people to think about that a little bit if they're experiencing anything like that too.
Yeah, that's good. For me, I just the whole area of being mindful. So, and there are tons of different things. I've got a whole book there on mindfulness. There are lots of things that you can do to be mindful, but have a look at how you can be mindful. Different exercises within mindfulness will suit different people. Some people like meditation, some people don't like meditation. So you have to find the things that work for you. Getting yourself grounded, thinking about moments in nature. So going out in nature and having walks and so on. So I'd really encourage people to, find that thing that gets you to notice the moments that you're in. And that's especially around the positive ones. And then to your point, you said something about, thinking about how you handle the moment. And it's looking at the positive and negative and making decisions about whether or not you're going to allow it to define you. It's a question, should you allow it to define you? Maybe not, especially if it's a negative one. And what are the things that you need to take you out of the thinking that comes with that? Because the thinking gets you stuck. So it's, what do I need? Do I need to actually share this with a friend and talk it out? Do I need to actually get some counselling, like we said before, or coaching to move me out of that thinking that might have been negative because somebody's leveled something at you that you weren't expecting? And so it's the activation of, I need to do something about this. I can't just let this moment especially if it's a negative one, I can't let this sit and fester and then shape me.
Yeah.
If it's a positive one, we know it's going to be for the good.
Yeah.
Totally. You've made me think of another two.
Oh,
I know. So many tips. So one is having time by yourself. So I've started to have 2 breaks a year where I go away by myself. And I take myself off to a spa that I go to, which I don't have to then think. I don't have to think about food or anything. And I can go for walks and I can work out and I can read my book at dinner and I'm on my own for just like 4 days, kind of 3 nights. But that time in my own company is actually really helpful for me to bring back the ability to be present and having some of that mindful time. You mentioned, Trudy, then about being grounded, which is something I'm working on a lot to make sure that I'm grounded. And I've worked on it by having acupuncture and having a bit of Reiki. Now, depending on your preference around alternative things, both of those things have really helped me get that sort of grounded things. And things like massage and stuff like that can also be really good to help. So it's finding all these little tools and tricks that can help you look at what you might need to sort of help. But you know, I can share a Reiki story.
No massages for me.
No, you don't like them,
to
do
be
you?
touched.
People touching me.
No.
Don't touch me.
What a bombshell.
What an episode to end on.
What a way to
Don't touch me.
That's not a moment that's delightful. Thank you for listening. If you want to find out more or subscribe to our newsletter, visit calmagerebels.com. We'd love to continue the conversation, so please connect, ask questions, and share your thinking with us. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn under Carb Mage Rebels. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to rate and review us.